Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Raised on radio. Power ballads, cocaine and payola. The AOR glory years 1976 to 1986 is when this landed on my desk in the production office. Oh my word, my little dark heart leapt with joy, because there is nothing I like better than big hair and a power ballad. REO Speedwagon, Boston, Journey. I mean, you name it. The man who has written the book that we needed, ladies and gentlemen, is Paul Rees. I'm delighted to say that Paul Rees joins me from a sun-kissed terrace in a pool at the Beverley, Wiltshire, with a willing groupie on his side, sipping a margarita. Morning, Paul.
Morning, Giles. I'll leave you with that illusion as well.
Whereabouts are you, my friend?
I'm in less than sunny Edinburgh, and there is no one on my arm.
There's no one there. Well, I'm sure after you pop, I don't know, a Pat Benatar cassette in your Ford Mustang, with the FM radio full pelt, I'm sure they'll be flocking to you with a bit of Bogota flake. Anyway, Paul, just explain a little bit about how you came to write this book and why you're so eminently qualified.
Well, I came to write. I ghostwrited a guy called Steve Lukather, who's the guitarist with Toto. Also has played on endless number of records, great session guitarist. I ghostwrote his memoir. And during the course of it, Steve's quite a verbose man. And he was telling me over and again that they'd not really had the credit for, he didn't believe they'd had the credit for what they'd done. Sold millions of records, wasn't widely acknowledged. So that's what stuck in my mind. And as I was going on, you start hearing these songs in the ether. There was that film, if you remember, The Fall Guy came out, and they were using Journey on it. And once you start looking at remembering back to your misbegotten youth and also remembering these records and then seeing that there's literally billions of streams of them on Spotify. And there wasn't really, it was critically ignored pretty much at the time, or else lambasted, but there's been no real substantial book on it. So I thought it was sort of an open goal.
You see, the thing is, I can't believe, because we've had books about prog rock. The Pistols are going on tour for their 50th anniversary, for goodness sake. And the old punks won't be spitting because they'll throw their dentures would fly out and hit the teeth. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, but you tend to forget how... I mean, I was in 1978, I'm a 10-year-old schoolboy, and we go to Los Angeles on holiday, okay? And we're staying in Simi Valley, and Toto's Hold the Line is number one in the US chart. It's a huge thing. And there is REO Speedwagon, Take It on the Run, etc. It's the first incantation. And if you're in the States, you turn on your FM radio, and it is absolutely rammed with this music.
Yeah, I think that's the point. It was the music of the American heartland in the kind of the same way that the mainstream country is now for a decade. And there was all manner of people. If you went to America then and you turned the dial on that FM station, that was the sound you were hearing, and it was perfectly produced pop music. But pretty much, if you think Rolling Stone was kind of the self-styled bastion of rock music at the time. So Journey, REO Speedwagon, Toto, Boston, none of them ever appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, which is quite remarkable when you think of how big those bands were and over such a sustained period. And I'm much exactly the same as you. I remember hearing Journey for the first time in 1981. I'd like to say I was 2 at the time, but I'd be lying.
Yeah.
And just think, where's this come? Because it was music that made us think about. It gave me the idea of what America was. It entirely, top down on the freeway, blue skies, big cities, cities lit up at night. That all came from that music.
And here's the thing, because the important thing with AOR is, with America, so many stations. I mean, so many stations all over the place. But they've got FM. I mean, Steely Dan there's a film called FM that comes out, which is brilliant. If you work in radio, it's brilliant. But the sound quality on FM changes everything. I mean, you just think in the same way that Dark Side of the Moon, you get hi-fi buffs going. Listen to this as the sound moves between speakers. But you've got that clarity, and also studios have come on in leaps and bounds. So you've now got a mixing desk which is the size of the cathedral at Notre Dame or something. And so there's going to be a lot of fiddling, and there's going to be a lot of production, and there's going to be a lot of late nights and far too many sugary drinks in recording studios.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that's really interesting, because it's kind of a social history as well. All the studios at that point. So two things happened when they suddenly put cars that were FM friendly and tuned to FM into cars in America, and this was meant to be listened to in your car. And then the guys who were going into the studios, a lot of the studios had FM transmitters at the studio, so they would record a song. As soon as they'd done it, go outside, sit in the car, tune the car to the studio transmitter, and they could hear immediately what their records sound like. So these were records made to be listened to. They're actually tailored and made to be listened to in the car, on the radio.
Wow. And the other thing is the fact that it's really interesting about Rolling Stone and the sort of the music press, because if you think about the British new music press, I mean, NME and Sounds and Melody, you know, they would prefer to have some guy in a back street writing songs, you know, with 3 chords rather than Shawaddy Waddy or something like that. So it's the same with Rolling. So they're trying to be, so say it's 1978, 79. You've got they're Talking Heads, Blondie, the cool bands coming out of CBGBs, or the sort of the burgeoning hip hop scene coming out of the West Coast, stroke the East Coast. So it's not cool enough. It's not cool enough for the media. But as you said, everywhere else, if you've got your CB radio, kids, because it's before mobiles, in your car in the States, and you've got Journey, and you've got a Journey in front of you, there is nothing better.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the thing. Music critics like to think that they are instrumental in things happening and discovering things, and this happened without music critics. It happened without their permission, without their sort of pushing this. It was people's music, and it was music made for people. So I think that's and the narrative's always been the same. It hasn't really changed. Like you said, if you look at the narrative for 1977, and we'll have it all over again next year. It'll be the anniversary of punk, and punk was this thing, and punk was dominant in 1977. The biggest selling records in 1977 were Fleetwood Mac Rumours and Meatloaf Bat Out of Hell and ELO Out the Blue. But they were the things that people were actually listening to at that time, and people are still listening to that music.
You see, you could argue that ELO are the closest thing you get to AOR, couldn't you, in England? Because of the production of. I mean, people always go, "Oh, Jeff Lynch, he was the sixth Beatle," but actually, if you listen to tracks, you know, something like Discovery or whatever, that's an AOR record, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's another one of those myths, isn't it, that Jeff Lynne is just ripped off the Beatles. And yeah, there's the Beatles album, and he was a Beatles fan. But Jeff Lynne, it's exactly that. He worked with Mac, who produced a lot of their records. He was the guy who went on and did Billy Squier, and he did Queen. Yeah. But same thing, he made records perfectly tailored to be listened to on the radio.
And the other thing about AOR is the fact that it's not coming from the West Coast or the East Coast. It's coming from all over the States. So, so a Journey is different to a Stick, which is different to a Boston, quote unquote, Boston. Guess where they come from. But however, Boston, it's not a they to begin with. It's one man at night in his basement who is an MIT student and has made all his album himself.
Yeah, I mean, that's another great thing. I mean, once you start delving into these things, it's characters that come out of it. The idea that it was faceless music, some of the characters and the ridiculous characters, but Tom Scholz from Boston, a genuine genius in one way and an extraordinarily complicated character. But yeah, a guy who sat in his basement 4 years on his own with a little homemade studio that he got, spending all the money that he and his wife were nominally saving up to buy themselves a house, kept making this record and kept making this music and going back to it. And it was at the point of giving in when he just sent off one cassette that happened to have a song called More Than a Feeling on it. And that was the song that finally got him a record deal. And
that's him. That's not Boston as you'll get, because he then has to form a band damn quick to say, we've got, More Than a Feeling becomes a huge hit. And it's like, oh, blimey, I can't play everything at once all at the same time. It's not, the multiverse hasn't been invented at this point. So he has to go off and form the band, etc.
Yeah, and I love that there was they pretty much they lied to the record company. The record company wanted this big, elaborately produced record made in LA, so he sends the rest of his new band off to LA with a producer, and I think they did one vocal in LA, and he did the rest of the record in his basement. And when it came out, the label had no idea that it had been made. So pretty much, you can't get much more punk rock. Yeah. Than doing a one-man thing in a basement.
And let's not forget, people will say, oh, blimey, it's all cheesy and big grins, but phenomenal musicians. We'll come on to Toto in a second, but like Blue Oyster Cult, I mean, I know everybody sort of knows it from Saturday Night and More Cowbell, but if you listen to their oeuvre, if you like, yeah, it's you know. And I have a friend, I had a mate who was in the support band who had the honour of supporting Blue Oyster Cult at Fort Lauderdale in the 80s, and he still talks in hushed tones about the setup and the absolute. I mean, these guys have got proper music chops.
Yeah, I think it's one of the last times that's another part of the book that really interests me. It's one of those times. It was people who got together in a recording studio, made music on the spot, and as it happened, they were trained musicians. They'd worked at the craft. So the idea that this was all done by a committee in a laboratory, most of these songs were people in a room with someone will play a guitar lick and someone else will go, that sounds good, what should we do with that?
Yeah.
It was music made up out of the ether and by people who knew how to play music.
I interviewed the bass player from Nickelback last year, right? Brilliant guy. And he, because they were called, and this is, they were called, we're corporate rock. And he was like, we're Nickelback. We come from like all you can see out of our front door was just grain as far as the eye could see. We didn't even see a building. So how they can say we're corporate when we literally spent, years playing small gigs? We're more punk than punk is these days.
Yeah, there was a great. If you look at, I think Journey are the band. If you had to pick one band out of that era,
right.
The number of great songs that Journey have, but the way Journey operated, there's probably across the whole of their career 1-2 songs that are longer than 4 minutes. They're more economical than the Ramones. They knew exactly how to trim away all the fat and get to the point.
Because at the same time, because everybody's been waxing lyrical about prog rock recently. I mean, there's no. I mean, a 3 minute prog rock track, and you haven't got past the opening stanzas about it's time for tea in Worcestershire, and the Queen of Hearts is whatever. And oh god, we've got 11 minutes of this. Because it's radio friendly. It is radio friendly. It's what you want in the car, and also it's accessible. You don't, you like Journey, okay? That's because, and think about this, because we're of a certain age. So we were there the first time round listening to it on the radio, taping it. Kids, ask your parents. But High School Musical comes along. High School Musical comes along. This American thing, in the same way that Stranger Day Things, or whatever it's called, will bring people to Kate Bush. But Journey gets reintroduced by High School Musical for a bunch of kids who have never heard this. And they get it because it's accessible in a way that maybe, the Ramones aren't.
Yeah, it's that thing. I mean, my wife could probably explain this far better than I can. It's because she's a hypnotherapist, but it's that notion of music.
You're going under this to the sound of sticks.
But it hits this part in the brain, whether it releases all the dopamine and all the rest of it. It's happy music that gets to a chorus it immediately makes you feel better. It's uplifting.
So let's talk about Toto, all right? At Range Down Africa, phenomenal drumming. I mean, the drummer in Toto, in all those early, Hold the Line, I love a Hold the Line. And it is, they all get sort of like taken as like, oh, blimey, here comes the Range Down Africa. But again, great music, great production, phenomenal musical skills.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, the guys in Toto there was a whole session music scene in LA, and Jeff Porcaro, who was the drummer in Toto, was the drummer in Steely Dan, and you had to be the best of the best to play in Steely Dan because they were phenomenal musicians. Yeah. And Porcaro isn't really a rock drummer; he's a funk drummer. He's got that sort of shuffling beat that makes Toto. That's the magic in the Toto sound. But they went on and they were the house band on Thriller. They were Michael Jackson's band on the biggest selling album of all time. And the reason why is because they were really, really good. And I just love the story about, Africa's just exactly what we were talking about. Porcaro noodling around in a studio with taking tape out and setting it across stools and all the rest of it to do a drum loop, because that was the only way to do it. And they get that. And then him and David Page start thumbing through geography textbooks to come up with lyrics. I mean, they've never been to Africa. I mean, any band that can get Serengeti into a rock song. I
know. Now, so far, so very sort of nerdly, and people in basements and playing with tape loops. And you and I, Paul, can go on about reverbs and Sound City and the whole bits and pieces and what drum techs are doing. However, behind that all American, get your girl on the road in a Trans Am sort of thing, there are a certain amount of recreationals going on here, aren't there?
Yeah, I think there was as much marching powder done as at any era in music.
Which is funny when you think, because you think that punk is, but they're all doing heroin and speed. I mean, we're talking marching powder here, aren't we? Kids, cover your ears, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, there was I guess it's pretty. As it goes into the 80s,
yeah,
it's the music that it epitomises that decade. It's big, it's flash, it's aspirational, and it's driven by the white powder. And I think it's Steve Lukather said that. Steve Lukather said to me, everybody was doing it at the time, including the pool guy, the guy who comes and sweep out your pool. And if they told you they weren't, they were lying.
But your pool was done in 15 seconds, so it was okay. All right, because
your pool got done very, very quick.
We're not even at the watershed, and let's not even. But in comparison to Fleetwood Mac on tour, that it's still sort of second division as opposed to Champions League. Let's move swiftly onwards, because there is organised crime in here as well. Because the mafia have always been involved in music going back to Sinatra, the whole bits and pieces, because it's very easy to lose money and wash a lot of money through. And the headline, payola. So explain that a little bit about what is payola, and why there are an awful lot of Italian Americans in AOR.
Well, the payola was, the record companies at the time, to get records on the radio, bribery, you'd pretty much could call it. And they employed these. They didn't do it themselves. They didn't get their hands dirty. So they would employ these independent record pluggers who may have had connections to people with names that ended in I, and were, there was a certain amount. So these guys would literally trundle around to record companies and offer incentives to people to play their records. So it could have been in terms of cars, in terms of trips, in terms of things that were secreted in brown envelopes, and it went on for years and years and years. So there's the people at records radio stations, program managers who were on minimum wage, who would be driving Porsches because of the number of rare times they'd taken the backhander to play a record. And there were Senate hearings on this and all sorts of things. But it went on unchecked for years and years and years.
And the thing is, though, if you get, if you have a band, right, and if you've ever played in a band, how. It's not the Swiss Family Robinson. Things tend to get a bit heated at the best of time. Now, if you put people in a studio in a confined space for a time, and add the aforementioned to the mix in powder form, and then shake it all up, you're going to get a few clashes. You're going to get sort of drumsticks hurled across. So it was there are massive bus stops, and egos do get in check, don't they?
Yeah, I think, as I've said, that massive success, the aforementioned things that we've mentioned, and people being in close proximity to each other and working non-stop is only going to end up one way. And there are some massive egos wielding their way through the button. It makes it all the more entertaining, doesn't it? You should just think of Foreigner and Mick Jones and Lou Gramm, who pretty much bicker and argue all. I love the way they hatched this way of deciding who'd written, how to share the songwriting royalties. So Mick Jones would write down on a piece of paper the percentage he thought he'd written of the song. Lou Gramm would write down his percentage, and somehow they'd agree. And they got to I Want to Know What Love Is. And I think Lou Gramm wrote down 40%. Mick Gramm wrote down 96 and refused to budge on it. And so Lou Gramm, you imagine the amount of money that Lou Gramm lost in that sweeping moment. And they continue to argue about it to this day.
So when you come to write a book about this, who's willing to talk about it? Obviously, you'd mentioned you'd go through it in a book before with, one of the biggest names in AOR. So how do you get constructive narrative, Paul, about this?
Well, that's two things. I guess the first thing is who is going to talk, because, like we said, unwieldy egos.
Yeah.
If the book's specifically about them, they're more likely to talk. Tell them there's everybody else featured in it, and people tend to be slightly less willing. So I spoke to about, I think it's 54 people specifically for the book. And then the rest of it is a matter of research. So there were people who I couldn't get to. There were people who refused to talk. There was one magnificent example, a guy called Jim Mustaia, who drummed on the aforesaid first Boston album, who agreed to be interviewed. And then when I rang him at the appointed time, had clearly forgotten that we were due to be interviewed and seemed to be feeding a budgie, because I could hear feed being scattered. And the
That's
birds.
a cover story. That's a cover story, Paul.
Nothing else.
What are you doing? I'm feeding the budgie. Yeah. Come quietly, you know. How much fun was it to write this, Paul? Because, I mean, actually, before we get to how much fun, but for those who are dismissing this as just, two blokes of a certain age reminiscing about not having Trans Ams in Los Angeles, but if AOR gives us radio play, it gives us structure. Thank you, Prog. It also gives us power ballads. And if you're going to do your musical timeline, you get this period, and then we go into big hair metal. And David Coverdale, second in this thing of Whitesnake, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at Heart. We're looking at Cinderella, all that lot. But the power ballad keeps going all the way through up until he says this name while crossing himself, Taylor Swift. So you don't just say it's not a fad. It's not glam rock or it's not yacht rock or anything like that. AOR is the full bringer and is still really current. If you look at half the stuff, and he said that advisedly, that it's in the charts today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been massively influential because it's as important almost as the musicians of this are the producers, because they knew how to make records sound great. So a guy like Mutt Lange. Yeah. So Mutt Lange goes and it starts off working with Foreigner, does Def Leppard, goes on to work with Shania Twain. Yeah. And then that whole sound carries right the way through to, as you said, right the way up to Taylor Swift. It's a sound that's embedded in some of the biggest pop music of all time. And the songs themselves haven't gone away. We mentioned Africa. Obviously, there's "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey, but these songs are still being played. They're still. You could go out to pretty much any karaoke night anywhere in the world and guarantee that someone will be murdering one of these songs. Oh, yeah.
Babe by Styx. Babe is so much more difficult on karaoke than people think it is, because it changes the octave change. And, it's like you think they're having a mild stroke halfway through. Babe, I love you. So, what are you hoping that people will take, Paul, from this Meisterwork raised on radio? What do you think they're going to learn on their journey? See what I did there?
Well, I hope that... Firstly, that it's entertaining. I mean, I think the story is, it's like all great stories. It's full of vivid characters doing foolish things, and that's always, hopefully it'll be entertaining. Lord knows at the moment we could do with some distraction and some entertainment that isn't dark and bleak. But also, the credit's due for the fact that these people wrote some indelible, fantastic songs. I mean, I read something the other day where somebody was going about "Don't Stop Believing," Journey, writing about it and going, it's still here 40 years later and it's still dreadful. Well, it isn't. Yeah. It's a great song. It's a perfectly made pop song. So hopefully there'll be an element of revisionism about what this music was.
The book is called Raised on Radio, Power Ballads, Cocaine and Payola, the AOR Glory Years, 76 to 86. It's by Paul Rees. Paul, if people want to but you can order it by our own virtual bookstore, by the way. Click on the front cover and it'll come to you. Paul, if people want to follow you and say nice things to you on your social media, where's the best place to find you?
You can find me on Substack. I do a Substack, which is under my name, and also the usual X and Instagram.
The book is called Raised on Radio. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure to start the week with you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.